I met her about a year ago, at a time when the restaurant I inherited from my father was on the brink of closing. It was losing customers fast. The restaurant is in a town near a popular tourist spot, something like Napa Valley. Tourists used to flood our town, making it a lively place. But a few years back, the town's train station became just a stop for the express line, which led to fewer tourists and a steep decline in customers. I was confident in the taste of my food and didn't want to shut down the restaurant without a fight. But I was out of ideas. To clear my head, I decided to spend a night at a hot springs hotel in the neighboring town of Sonoma, a place that also had ties to my father. As I was settling in, a young woman approached me and introduced herself as Catherine, the proprietor. "I'll bring your dinner with drinks and appetizers shortly, but the main dish may take a bit longer." "I hope you understand," she said. "Is there a problem?" I asked. "Actually, one of our kitchen staff fell ill unexpectedly, so we're a bit short-handed. If it's an emergency, there's nothing we can do. Is the staff member okay?" "Yes, our head chef is conscious, but due to his age, we had to take precautions." I realized that the person she was referring to was the head chef, and the reason I chose this hotel was to taste his dishes. My late father and this chef had been apprentices together at the same fine dining restaurant. They often argued about the taste of the dishes and eventually had a falling out. My father opened his own restaurant, while the other became the head chef here. I often argued with my father about our restaurant's dishes too, but now, as I approached 40, I understood that chefs argue because they recognize each other's skills. The stubbornness and pride of a chef can lead to conflicts like this. I came to this hotel hoping to gain some insights for revitalizing my restaurant, but it seemed like I wouldn't get to taste the head chef's dishes after all. I couldn't help but wonder if my old man was somehow interfering from beyond the grave because he didn't like the idea of me using this place for inspiration. But even though they had a falling out, I knew my father wouldn't meddle like that. Catherine apologized again. "We will reduce your accommodation fee by 10% as a small compensation." A 10% discount? You kidding me? I thought to myself. The next morning, when I went to check out, I saw Catherine being bombarded by complaints from other guests, likely because of last night's dinner. "Cut it out, will you?" I snapped at one of the guests. "What's your problem? You ate all your dinner, right?" I ate it, but it was so late that my entire schedule got messed up. "Planning to go somewhere nice?" I asked, trying to lighten the mood. "It's none of your business," the guest grumbled. "It was an emergency." "Understand that," I said firmly. Seeing me step in, the complainers seemed to give up. Feeling a bit smug, I gave a small smirk at Catherine, who was bowing her head in thanks. In the end, I returned home without finding any clues on how to revamp my restaurant. I had no choice but to keep running my modest business, catering to a few regular customers. One day, a man who looked to be around 70 walked into the restaurant. He wasn't much of a drinker, slowly savoring a warm bourbon while enjoying a few dishes. Occasionally, he'd nod approvingly and murmur, that's good." When I served him grilled chicken and soup as his last course, he seemed to enjoy the chicken but looked puzzled by the soup. "Is it not to your liking?" I asked, concerned. He inquired if the soup was made with the same recipe I inherited from my father. "Well, yes it is," I replied, now worried there might be something wrong with the flavor. The man then introduced himself. I apologize for the abruptness. I'm Richard Taylor. The name didn't ring a bell, and I was confused. "I used to share meals with your father back in the day. It's me, Richard," he clarified. It finally clicked. He was the head chef from the resort I had stayed at, the same one who fell ill abruptly. He had been my father's fellow apprentice, the one with whom my father had parted on bad terms. "I'm deeply sorry for my sudden illness when you visited us," he apologized. "How's your health now?" I asked. "I'm fine now, as you can see," Richard responded, blushing a bit as he ran his hand through his trimmed hair. "Did you come by chance?" "I heard it from the young proprietress," I replied. She had told me about the man who had placated a disgruntled customer the morning after the head chef had collapsed. She checked the guest book and informed me it was a certain Noah Jones. "So you're the son of that Jones," Richard said, "and you came all this way to thank me." That reminded me of how my father and Richard had parted ways over their differing cooking styles. When I asked Richard about it, he said, "That's true, but we respected each other's skills as chefs. It was just a matter of different directions." My father always aimed to complement alcohol, so he pursued flavors that matched well with drinks. Richard, on the other hand, not being a big drinker, sought after flavors that appealed to everyone. Though my father and Richard rarely met, they stayed in touch. "You know, I briefly met you at your father's funeral," Richard added. "Oh, I see." "My apologies for not remembering," I replied. "It's been 5 years already." "Yes, time flies," Richard said, looking off into the distance. I was curious about Richard's reaction when he tasted the soup earlier. "About the soup," he began. "It was delicious, but it felt different from your father's flavor." So I made the soup and offered it to Richard again. After he took a sip, he said, "It feels similar, but does it lack something?" "Well, how should I put it? It's a more refined taste." "Richard, weren't you usually served my father's soup after a heavy night of drinking?" "Yes, that's right," he replied. "Back in our apprentice dormitory, your father and I used to drink together a lot. I'm not a heavy drinker, so I'd get drunk quite quickly. Then your father would say, 'Here, have this as the last drink.' It was so delicious. Even when I tried to recreate it by brewing the broth my way, I couldn't. I asked your father if there was a secret ingredient, and he'd say, 'The secret ingredient is love, keeping it a mystery.' The secret was quite simple. My father's dishes were generally strong and flavorful to pair well with alcohol. However, he made his final course soup light. The method was straightforward, nothing special. He simply added 1 cup of hot water to 3 cups of regular soup stock to dilute it. After heavy drinking, that was just right and healthy, according to my father's philosophy. "I see," Richard said, taking a sip of the soup I'd made from scratch, thinned with hot water. "It seems I haven't had enough to drink tonight. Is it perhaps a bit bland for your taste?" "Yes," I admitted, and we both burst out laughing. We spent some time reminiscing about my old man. Toward the end, Richard got serious. "Sorry to ask, but did you lose customers after the express train stopped at the station?" "Well, yeah, I guess so." "Has it affected your business?" "It's been barely making ends meet recently." "Why don't you come work with me after I retire?" Richard asked. "After you?" "Richard, you mean at your hotel." Richard explained that he's getting old and thinking about retiring soon. The staff he currently has are excellent chefs, but something is missing. It seems everyone's too obedient. They lack the spirit. We don't have anyone with the backbone your father had. I wonder if you'd be a good fit. I wasn't sure if I had as much spirit as my old man did. Plus, it wouldn't be fair to the chefs who'd been there from the start if I just walked in. I'm honored by your offer, but I can't give up on this place. It's my dad's legacy. I'm not ready to let go yet. When I said this, Richard seemed to understand and nodded several times. "You're right. I was too hasty. After all, you're the son of that great man." He left me an invitation to visit his kitchen if I ever changed my mind, along with a complimentary voucher for his hotel. About 3 months passed since Richard started visiting my diner. My business was on the verge of collapse. Maybe I should go check out Richard's hotel. I wasn't ready to close the doors of my diner just yet, but I knew I needed to do something if I wanted to move forward. "Mr. Jones, we've been expecting you." "Did I arrive a bit too early?" I asked, aiming to get there before the chefs got busy with dinner preparations. "I'll call the head chef for you. He should be free at this time." That's why you came early, right? She said, smiling as she understood my intent. The head chef is also eagerly waiting for you. Hey everyone, listen up. This is Noah Jones, the man I've been telling you about. As soon as he guided me to the kitchen, Richard introduced me to the other chefs. Everyone bowed their heads and said, "Nice to meet you, Richard." I'm still not sure I understand it. It just happens that some of our experienced staff decided to go independent recently. Look, they are all young, aren't they? So, I told them that a friend of mine might be able to lend a hand. That's you, Richard said. But I felt a little uncomfortable. After all, I hadn't given up on my dad's diner. That night, after a dip in the hot springs and returning to my room, the hotel's maid had set up my dinner. When asked what I'd like to drink, I ordered a glass of bourbon. Shortly thereafter, the bourbon was brought in. The one who brought it was the young proprietress named Catherine. Thank you for coming today. Thank you for having me. Please, have a drink. Thank you. I'm honored to have the young proprietress herself serving me. Oh, it's nothing. I've heard about your father from the head chef. Recently, Richard has been talking about your dad to everyone every chance he got. He told me that the person I am now is because of your father. It's odd. My dad used to tell me about Richard, whom he had a falling out with. He referred to him as a fellow apprentice. I continued, you know what they say, the better the friendship, the fiercer the fight. I mused while I poured myself another glass, and then another from the bottle that Catherine had handed me. Please, feel free to indulge tonight, she suggested. She was quite persuasive, and by the time I was fairly inebriated, Richard arrived. How about this as a second helping from your dad? A nice bowl of soup to finish off, he offered. I felt a strong urge from Catherine and Richard to become a cook at their hotel, but I couldn't bring myself to close the restaurant my father had left me. That night, I was alone in my bed, and I couldn't fall asleep. What part of this dish do you not like? It's old-fashioned, the food Dad cooked. It doesn't matter what you said, we're serving this to customers. I'd remembered arguing with my father about cooking. Those memories faded in and out in my drunken head. My restaurant was quiet for the days that followed until one day an unexpected customer arrived. It was Catherine. Oh, you startled me. I just decided to come. Did Richard suggest you come here? Yes, partly, but I also wanted to come, she replied. Just a moment, please, I said to Catherine, and pulled in the shop curtain that was hanging outside. Sorry, but we're closed for today. Because of me? Catherine asked, looking a bit apologetic. Since you're already here, and it's not like we're busy. I gestured around the empty restaurant with a resigned laugh. So things are really tough. Huh. I'm ashamed to admit it, I confessed. I heard rumors about a major blow to the next town ever since the express train started passing through, she mentioned. Anyway, let's forget about these depressing talks. Let's enjoy ourselves. Catherine was quite a drinker. She was the only daughter in her family that had been running a spa resort in the area for generations. Naturally, she became the young proprietress. She had learned to drink since she took over the role. I start working early in the morning, and I find myself looking forward to a drink after a long day. I'm the same, but in my case, I think I just inherited my father's love for alcohol, I replied. Just a few months earlier, Catherine and I had met only once or twice, but we were now talking like old friends. Come on, let's have another round. Another one? I asked, surprised. Yes, just one more. But my heart was already full. Dad, I'm sorry. I can't keep running this restaurant anymore. 6 months later, I closed the restaurant that my father had left me and took a job as the deputy chef at the spa resort where Catherine and Richard were. Thanks to Richard's efforts, the existing chefs warmly accepted me when I was appointed as deputy chef. The young proprietress, Catherine, had proposed a condition. Please live here in this resort and join us for a drink after work. This was exactly what I wished for. I had no reason to refuse. Noah, come on over here. Let's have a drink again tonight. Why not? Let's do it. When I entered the room where she was waiting, I saw Catherine happily pouring whiskey. Here, have a glass. I responded with a nod and took the shot glass in my hand. As Catherine poured for me, I thought to myself, I'm about to turn 40. It's not that I haven't had girlfriends in the past, but I've stayed single up to this age. My late parents were late to marry, and when my dad was 40, I was born. Now, as I'm about to turn the same age as my dad was when I was born, I'm here every night getting whiskey poured for me by Catherine. Maybe this is what they call fate. What do you mean? In response to Catherine's question, I said this. Will you accompany me for a nightcap? For the rest of our lives. For the rest of our lives. After a moment, Catherine smiled broadly and nodded vigorously. Catherine and I gazed at each other. It was a moment when our feelings connected. Thus, Catherine and I got married, with Richard, who retired, serving as a matchmaker. Working together, we strive to manage the hotel.